Okay, so welcome everybody. As I said, I'm Louise Setti. I'm a careers consultant here at the University of Manchester Careers Service, and I'm joined by Cara Treasure, a graduate from the university. He currently works for the Royal Geographical Society, and also I'm joined by Gareth Fryer, my colleague, who, like me, links with the humanities faculty. So this session is all about finding hidden jobs and learning about speculative approaches, why sometimes it's a good idea not to just wait in the hope that an employer you're really interested in will advertise a vacancy, but instead finding a suitable person within that organisation to reach out to introduce yourself to. So we're going to be exploring both hidden jobs, but also speculative approaches to employers. So what do we mean by hidden jobs? First of all, I want to say that we're talking about hidden jobs. They're not secret. They are there to be found. It's really important that you appreciate that. So it's not that employers are trying to make life difficult for you when they're not advertising something prominently. There could be all sorts of reasons why they are not advertising on a big vacancy site, for instance. But I'll come back to that in a moment. So if we look at this graphic, it's easy to see that only a small percentage of jobs will be advertised on jobs boards, for instance. And then there'll be a slightly bigger proportion that perhaps are promoted through recruitment agencies, headhunters. So headhunters are people who perhaps work for themselves or a recruitment agency and are employed to find a suitable match for a high-level position on behalf of an employer. Contacts, so often vacancies, opportunities are found out through word of mouth. So, for instance, you put the word out through your support network, friends and family. I'm really interested in working in this particular area. And they may know someone working for an employer that might be of interest to you, and they then alert you to an opportunity that is coming up with that employer. So you found out about it before it was advertised, or in fact, perhaps it was never going to be advertised very prominently and you might not have discovered it. Other ways that people come across vacancies: they may already be working for an organisation and there may be a vacancy that is only promoted to internal candidates. Or they may get a promotion or an opportunity for a secondment. So that means a chance to work in a different part of the organisation for a limited period of time. Or they may be covering somebody's maternity leave. So going back to the tip of this triangle, adverts, why wouldn't an employer prominently advertise an opportunity? Well, it can cost quite a lot of money to do that. And if an employer doesn't have a big recruitment budget, then that's not available to them. Or they may be concerned about advertising too prominently because they will attract a huge volume of applications, a higher number than they can reasonably process. Or they may need someone to start really quickly. They may need to use word of mouth and perhaps social media to promote a vacancy they have, because the deadline for applications is really very soon. And using social media and word of mouth is very effective and doesn't take long at all by definition. But placing an advert, you've got to think carefully about how you're going to be writing that advert, because it is almost like a sort of piece of marketing material. You are presenting your organization to a wider public. You may have to think about a suitable image to use. So this all takes time. So those are just a few examples of reasons why employers may not prominently advertise a vacancy, or indeed advertise it at all. So we have done some really fascinating research at the Careers Service around the behaviours that successful graduates share. One of my colleagues several years ago was involved in some research where hundreds of new graduates were surveyed about what they do, and we found that those who were in positions that they had aspired to do, there were things that they really were excited by, got a lot of satisfaction from, shared these three behaviours. They were curious. They were really keen to find out about the area of work that they ended up in. They were curious to find out about employers in that career sector. They were happy to put some energy into connecting with people. Perhaps reaching out to employers in some cases, certainly going to events, and we put on a lot of events, as you know, because you found out about this one. It's part of Future Fortnight. So the Careers Service puts on a lot of events that you can access, but Eventbrite is a really good way of finding out about employer events. So perhaps they had reached out to employers through going to events led by them. And they were courageous. So it's all very well finding out about an area of work, connecting with people, but if you stop there, not a lot's going to happen. You've got to be courageous. You've got to be prepared to take the next step, to put in an application, to send that email to a friend of a friend who's working in the area of work of interest to you, to perhaps connect with an employer on LinkedIn. Now that's the professionals version of Facebook, and in a moment Gareth will be showing you how to do an alumni search on LinkedIn. But before then, I'm going to show you our website, because it's an amazing resource that will help you be curious, be connected, and courageous. So Gareth will tell me if that's not visible, and I assume it is. Fantastic. So our website is careers.manchester.ac.uk, and it's a treasure trove of information. It's absolutely fantastic, and I would encourage you after this session to explore it. Now, in relation to finding hidden jobs, the best way to go about this is to start with the Which Career section of our website, because thinking about being curious, you need to read about the career area of interest to you. And clicking on that, you will see that we have got these broad headings. If you click on a heading for the career area of interest to you, you will get some top-level information introducing you to common ways of finding vacancies. Now, by way of example, I'm going to click on Media, Creative and Cultural, because that is a good example of a career sector where very often opportunities are found through word of mouth, through speculative approaches, and that simply means reaching out to employers before you've seen an opportunity advertised. And also, opportunities can be found through organisations' own social media. So it's very common for media organisations to use Twitter to alert people to a current opportunity. So here you've got top level information about media, creative and cultural sectors. And if we scroll down, you'll see an introduction to getting in and getting experience. And here it explains, paragraph 4, many opportunities in the media, creative and cultural sectors aren't prominently advertised or indeed advertised at all. For this reason, we'd recommend going to the job search strategy section of our website. So that's one way of linking to that section, and I'm going to show you another one in a few minutes' time. We also link to information about using social media, including LinkedIn. Now you're going to get that top level information for any career sector that is of interest to you. So if we just scroll down, say I want to find out more about a specific category, say TV. I can click on that and I'm going to get more detailed information about getting in and getting experience. And then we suggest joining the Career Service Media Club, which is where we post opportunities we come across on our Facebook group. And we also, from time to time, have events, which is a great way of connecting with fellow students and recent graduates interested in the media, but also with employers and graduates who are our guest speakers. And then we link to a lead training body for this sector, Screen Skills. Now, again, I'm just using this as an example, but these training bodies can be found in many different sectors, and you will find links to them from the categories on the left-hand side under which career. And then we've got useful links for TV. So that's taking us through to this organisation, Screen Skills, and they are super keen to make it as straightforward as possible for people to find opportunities in this sector of work. And there are similar organisations working on behalf of a sector for any other career area you may be interested in. And we will give you links to those organisations, as I said, from those categories in the Which Careers section of our website. So here you've got further information. So getting in, and if we have a look here, we've got other suggested ways of finding out what you need to know to fuel that curiosity. And a lot of sort of similar organisations will take this approach of giving you perhaps an opportunity to log on to a webinar or a recording to find out more about that industry. There is also a section on here about making speculative approaches to employers in that sector. So I'm just going back to the Career Service website. And what we also do is link to these detailed job profiles. So a runner position is a very sort of common entry-level role in the TV industry. So I'm going to click on that profile. That sits on a website called Prospects. And here, if you scroll down, you're going to get more information about what that job involves, what you would expect to earn. And this is really important, particularly if you're reaching out to an employer before you have seen an opportunity advertised. If they then engage with you and say, yes, we'd love to have a chat with you, and then an offer comes out of that, you need to know what you should expect to be earning, because they may ask you, if it's a freelance opportunity, well, what would your hourly rate be? Or if it's an entry-level role with a salary, what salary were you expecting? And so these job profiles on Prospects will give you valuable information about the typical salaries for any kind of graduate role that may be of interest to you. And then it will tell you about what to expect regarding working hours, and also the culture of organisations, entry requirements, skills required. And here it goes on to explain networking is essential, and you should send your CV to as many production companies and post-production houses as you can. So these profiles, and you'll find one for any kind of graduate job of interest to you, can be found via our website, but also by going directly to prospects.ac.uk. And within that profile, you'll get valuable information as well as an idea of where and how you will find vacancies. And if we scroll down, you've got further information about typical employers, but also crucially, links to specialist job sites. Because whilst we're looking at hidden jobs and speculative approaches, we also need to be looking at specialist job sites which are commonly used by employers for a particular career sector. So you don't miss out on something that has been advertised, but not advertised on a big job board like Indeed, but advertised on a specialist job site. And you can see that there are 4 listed there for this runner position. So just going back to our website, okay, you've fueled your curiosity, you've got an idea of the common practices used by employers in the career sector of interest to you regarding advertising vacancies, or perhaps depending on people being more proactive and reaching out to them. You will have done your research, you'll have fueled your curiosity. So what next? Well, if you decide that you want to do some speculative job searches and reach out to employers, go to this section of our website under Jobs and Experience, Job Search Strategies. And here we have got this excellent section, Speculative Job Search. And this explains in great detail that not all vacancies are advertised, which means that sometimes it makes sense to make a direct inquiry to an employer. And we take the fear out of that by just explaining step by step how to do that. So we make it as easy as possible for you to understand the importance of researching a sector, researching relevant employers, how to make initial contact, could be through LinkedIn, could be through tapping into your support network. It might be a friend of a friend, know somebody working for that organisation, and so on. And we also will take you through to an example of a speculative cover letter, because if you're going to be sending a CV to an employer, it's far more likely to be read if you have put together a winning email or speculative cover letter attached to that email. And we explain in this section here how to write a speculative cover letter or email. So we again will take you through step by step how to do that. And also we've got a link to how to put together a winning CV. Just scrolling down there, you can see it. And if we just go back, it's important to start thinking about your image. How are you projecting yourself to other people? What does your social media say about you? I would say put your name in a search engine and see what happens. You know, it's really important that you do check how you're coming across if somebody does a search for you by name. And actually use social media effectively. So start following employers of interest to you through their social media. and think about using LinkedIn. We've got a lot of information on there about how to put a profile together, and Gareth is going to be explaining more about LinkedIn in a moment. So, just to remind you, lots of help and advice available from the Career Service. You can book a half-hour appointment, or you could get an application looked over. If you had an interview coming up, we could put you through a practice one. If you're an international student, don't miss out on this section here. Lots of information on this website to help you, as well as a link to Career Connect, our online portal for events and jobs. So again, as I said before, don't miss out on opportunities that are advertised by just assuming that everything is hidden, because that's not the case. Do check Career Connect for opportunities. That's where employers upload their vacancies, because they are really keen to get an application from a Manchester student or recent graduate. While you're looking for opportunities, think about ways to continue to build your experience. And you might do that through volunteering, through virtual work experience. And if you have a look at this section of our website, we give suggestions for how you might do that. Often if you're doing volunteering or work experience, that not only adds to your CV, but it's also a great way to meet people who could be of help to you. Just going to go back to my presentation, but also on the subject of social media, really important that you engage with the Career Service social media, because we use Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. So that's a great way of keeping up to date with opportunities that we post on there. Don't overlook the obvious thing. Use search engines in a very targeted way to look for the kind of employers that you are interested in. Use existing contacts. Now is the time to let people know that you're interested in a particular career area. There's this idea that we're all only 6 degrees of separation from anybody we may want to make contact with. It's an interesting one to put to the test. So you might know someone who knows someone who knows someone, until you get to that person who you would like to make contact with. If somebody does put you in touch with a helpful contact, be sure to follow up with a thank you. And if you're feeling nervous about doing that, don't forget they were once at the same stage as you. So, summary, do your research, use the Which Career section of our website, have a look at the information on the website for applications and job search strategies, continue to go to events, use Career Connect to find out about those. Think about continuing to get some experience. I suggested volunteering and virtual work experience as 2 examples, and connect with people. That's so important. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Gareth, who is going to introduce you to LinkedIn. Thank you, Gareth.
Thanks very much, Louise. I'll just share my screen now. I'll just be a moment. Can you see my slides okay, Louise? Can I just check? Perfect, brilliant, thank you. Right, okay, everybody. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview now of LinkedIn, so you can see how it can help you to grow your network and find a range of information that can help you to identify opportunities and individuals who might be able to help you to access those opportunities. Now, as Louise mentioned, LinkedIn is essentially the professional version of Facebook. It's fantastic for networking and it's fantastic for job research as well. And there's 2 things that you need to make LinkedIn work. You need a profile and you need connections. But we're going to start with the profile just briefly now. So before you start to make contact with people, it's important to make sure that your profile looks professional. Now, each section of the profile that you fill in doesn't need to be long and detailed, but you do need to make sure that it's complete and that you've got good spelling and grammar in there. You'd never give someone an unfinished CV, so just make sure you sort of hold your LinkedIn profile to that same standard, I would say. Make sure that you have a clear photo on there, that you've thought about the first 10 words of your headline, and that you have an up-to-date location on there as well, as this will be what appears when people search for you. And it will also be what they see when you make a connection request to them. Now, we're going to concentrate more on connections today, but if you are interested in kind of getting your profile up to scratch, then I really would recommend our LinkedIn Academy toolkit, and that will guide you through the process of creating a professional profile. Now, you can either access it through the QR code that's on the screen now, or by using the link that I'll pop into the chat a little bit later on for you. But today we're going to concentrate more on connections, as I said. So now, sometimes, as Louise alluded to earlier, students can be worried that an experienced professional on LinkedIn won't want to connect with them, or perhaps the professional won't see the benefit of connecting with the student. But remember, as Louise said, everyone, including those experienced professionals, had to start somewhere. They were once in your position and making their first connections and their first steps on their career journey. So the benefit of connecting with someone initially is that on LinkedIn, they become what's called your first degree connection. And that just means that you can see their whole profile, you can see their career history that's led them into the industry that perhaps you're interested in. And that helps you because it means that you can see different routes that can be taken to get into a role of interest. You can also see a person's skills as well. There's a skills section within their profile, so you can get an idea of the skills that recruiters might be looking for. And also, the person that you've connected with, their first degree connections then become your second degree connections. And that means you can see those profiles as well. And the more connections you make, the more useful information LinkedIn will hold for you. So growing your network as well will also make the searches that you do on LinkedIn much more effective. So, for example, companies have pages on LinkedIn too, not just individuals. So you can search for a particular company that you're interested in, and then the search results for the individuals connected to that company will be based on your network. So what I mean by that is if you're connected to someone who perhaps is connected to an employee of that company, that employee will come up in your search results. Then you'll be able to have a look at their page and see the path that they took to working for that company. And I'll demonstrate that a little bit later on. Now, this can be particularly valuable for you for careers where there's not a specific pathway, as it can give you ideas and inspiration on a career route that can help you to get to where you want to be. So who can you connect with? Well, Louise covered that earlier, really, in terms of start with the people you know, keep it simple. So friends, course mates, work colleagues, members of societies that you're a part of, lecturers, careers consultants. Also, if you meet one of our former students at a university event, or you attend an event with a speaker, it's absolutely fine to reach out to them for a connection request as well. Lots of our alumni are very keen to connect with current students. So how can you find alumni on LinkedIn? That's what we're going to look at now. Because and the way we're going to do that is through what's called the alumni search tool. So the best way to do this is for me to demonstrate actively. So I'm going to come over to LinkedIn now for you. And as I said before, universities have profiles on LinkedIn too. So I'm just going to search for the University of Manchester. So it just comes up here. Then we click on the university's page, and it'll just be loading up now for us. So using what's called the alumni search tool is a great way of finding connections on LinkedIn that you otherwise wouldn't encounter in the real world. So let's have a look then. One thing I should point out actually is that you don't just have to search for University of Manchester graduates. If you're interested in working in a different city, say Barcelona, for example, you could search for University of Barcelona graduates who are living in that city, see who the major employers are there, who they're working for. And that can be a really excellent source of inspiration when it comes to, looking and maybe relocating perhaps due to employment. But let's use University of Manchester as our starting point today. So I'm going to go along and click on the alumni tab just here. And as you can see, we've got 276,000 alumni on LinkedIn. So that's an awful lot to look through. But fortunately, the alumni tool allows you to filter so you can see the alumni most relevant to you. So for example, here are the filters here. You can filter by location, where they live, where they work, the organization that they're with, what they do, so which sector or industry they're in, and what they've studied as well. And then finally, what they're skilled at. So some really interesting ways to kind of filter things down to make the results more relevant. So let's put this into practice then. Let's say that I'm a history graduate and I want to find out a bit more about what other history graduates have gone on to do to give me some ideas. So what I can do is go to the what they studied filter here, click add, type in history, and it'll come down just on the drop down there, and then I just click on that. And then it's going to bring up anyone under the people you know section here who has history mentioned in their education section. So there is an important caveat here in that it could bring up someone who studied history at A level. It could bring up someone who studied, say, history of science as part of a biomedical sciences degree. So it isn't a perfect pure search, but it's still going to give you really interesting, useful data and results. So under the people you may know section now, LinkedIn is going to show you details of people that have history mentioned in their education section. And then this is going to be based on and prioritized on whether they're a first, second or third degree connection of yours, but also how active they are on LinkedIn. Now, this is because LinkedIn is used a lot for recruitment. That's how they get their revenue. So LinkedIn will prioritize people who use the site regularly. And this is because they're much more likely to respond to an approach from a recruiter, say, compared to someone who hasn't used the site for 6 months. So in that sense, do keep that in mind. Make sure that you're one of those regular users. Check your feed regularly, like posts, for example, because you have a news feed on there like you would with Facebook. And that way you'll be one of those active users that LinkedIn will prioritize in its searches. So we've got a list of alumni here. We can click on one of the profiles of one of our alumni. We can see who they work for at the moment. So in this case, Sheffield Hallam University. We can scroll down and see their work experience, see their career path from how they've got to where they are now, their education, volunteering work. So lots of really interesting information to kind of inform your decision making and what you might do next. If we go back to the alumni tool as well, you can also use it to think about the area or the sector that you want to work in and search by that. So, for example, if we go up to our filters here and let's go to what they do, and let's click on business development, it's at the top there. So now what this is going to do is going to bring up people who have history mentioned in their education section and are in the business development sector. So let's, for example, click on one of the profiles just here. And then, as I said before, you've got access to that career path to have a look through, education, skills, interests, so on and so forth. And what's really useful from this point of view is that you can then also click on companies that they've worked for that you might be interested in and get a bit more data and information that way. So, for example, if we click on PwC here, then we can get some really interesting information about the management consultancy sector, for example. If you scroll down a little bit, the pages people also viewed section is really useful because it will show other organizations in that sector and perhaps bring up organizations that you've not considered or thought of. So you can click through to those company pages, find out a little bit more about them. Also, a really useful aspect of LinkedIn is that you can go to the People tab on a company page. So let's click that just here. And then you'll get, again, a list of people who work for that company. So you can click on those. You can look at career paths, for example, see the experience that they needed to get to a company that perhaps you're interested in working in, and even reach out to them as well and just ask them for some advice, for example. So that's really, really useful from that point of view, using company pages on LinkedIn. One final thing as well, just to mention in terms of the company pages, make sure you're following the companies that you're interested in, either the major companies in a sector that you're interested in or other companies that you've seen that you like the look of. Click the follow button there. And then what will happen is that if we just return to my main page, for example, you can see this is the news feed here. There's PwC there. So what they'll do is they'll start to post stories, information, content into your news feed, just like Facebook. And that way you can see what's going on with that company. You can develop and deepen your commercial awareness, which is really handy for job applications. And as Louise sort of mentioned earlier, you might even find out about job opportunities which are only advertised on LinkedIn. It might be that a company is just looking to advertise to people who are really interested and engaged in them already. So in summary, basically, LinkedIn's a really valuable tool when it comes to job searching. It's not just about putting a profile on there. It's also the information it gives you to make connections and find out more about the sectors that you're interested in. So thank you very much for listening to that part, and I will pass back over to Louise now.
Hi, Gareth, thank you very much. That was terrific. So I'm going to hand over now to Cara Treasure. So pleased you could join us today, Cara. Can I leave you to introduce yourself and explain your experience of finding hidden jobs?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Cara. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. It's really nice to speak to you all, although I can't see you all, but I know you're all there. So it's great to be here. So hopefully I can just add a little bit to all of the great things that Louise and Gareth have already discussed with you, and really hopefully just provide some examples. So it just really, helps to showcase everything that they've already kind of presented. So my name's Cara. So I did a bachelor's at Cardiff University. I did human geography and planning, and then I did my master's at Manchester. So at that time it was in the school which was called the Institute of Development Policy and Management. I think they might have renamed themselves, but my degree was poverty and development. So there was very international development focused, and they had lots of different strands. So it was fantastic. The professors were world, leading ones, as I'm sure many of you know who are on this call. So I studied, did both of my degrees, and then in between the two I spent some time at the British Red Cross. So it was in the crisis response team, and really gave me a good insight into the kind of working world, how you can put all of the theory that you've learned at university into practice. So that was brilliant, really good experience. And then I went on to do my master's. After that, I did 2 international development internships. They were both part-time, so I was able to do them alongside each other, which was really positive. So one was at Farm Africa, so very food security focused, working in many countries in Africa. The other one was at Pump Aid, so water and sanitation, solely in Malawi. So that was fantastic. And then I will go back to more on proactive job searches and networking, but I just thought I'd give you a kind of summary. But then an example of kind of keeping in touch with previous colleagues. After those internships finished, I returned to the British Red Cross. I was contacted when a role came up. So it wasn't through, applying to something that was advertised. It was through a connection. So I went back to the Red Cross. I was there for about 3.5 years, predominantly in crisis response, so responding to everything in the UK, from very small emergencies to huge ones. So the kind of prime year for that was 2017. So Grenfell, Manchester, London Bridge, and all of the other emergencies that happened. We were involved in the kind of multi-agency response. So I was responsible for the management of the psychosocial support, so deploying people to help those who suffered and been bereaved. I then went on through a secondment, so going back to what Louise said, so an internal secondment, developed the new recovery and resilience models to support people in the UK after emergencies. So that was brilliant, and that's the joy of something like a secondment, is it can enable you to experience another part of an organisation, but you then have the security of returning to your kind of core role. So you'll be in your role, go on the secondment, and then often go back. So it's quite a nice way to try something, and it might be that then that encourages you to explore that further down the line. So that was really positive. And then again, another example of already having the connection, I then returned to Pump Aid. Again, I was contacted when the role came up. So I then went on to manage all of the fundraising and communications. I also went out to Malawi to go and do some work out there and see all of the projects. And because it's such a small organisation, it meant that I could wear a lot of hats. So got involved with the programme side and lots of other elements of things going on. So that was brilliant. Again, another bit of experience that differed to being part of the world's largest humanitarian organisation, and that whole network, to then a much smaller organisation working in slightly different areas. And then I took a little bit of time out. So as we all know, the past few years have been, challenging in lots of different ways. So just had a little bit of time out. And then I am a geographer at heart. So when I saw that the role came up at the Royal Geographical Society, I applied for it, just went for it, and was lucky enough to get it. So I've been doing that for a couple of months now. And I had previously been involved in the society as a fellow. I was a youth member, so it's then just the dream to be, actually working there. So sorry if that was a bit of a long CV, but I just wanted to, kind of indicate the kind of stuff that I've done and how it links to everything that Louise and Gareth have already suggested with, yes, there may well be a formal, job application that you come across, but actually there are all of these other means and networks by which you can also find out about roles. So it's really important to stay in touch with people, keep really on top of the latest, even in certain subject areas. What's the latest things that everyone is discussing? What are lots of organisations doing in response to things like COVID or certain issues that you're particularly focused on? So if you've got a lot of, you want to go down the environmental route, for instance, what does all of that look like? What are the main discussion topics at the moment? And I think that really helps to inform you of kind of what's going on, but it can also really help when it comes to speculative approaches, when it comes to writing applications, keeping your CV, really up to date. All of that stuff is really helpful. So I think it helps to indicate that there's a lot that you can do sort of proactively. So, it's very common to be in the position at university where you start thinking, okay, what is it that I want to do? Some people will have a very clear idea of that. Other people, don't necessarily know exactly what they want to do. And both of those are totally fine and totally normal. And so I think it can be quite empowering to know that there therefore are things that you can do that can help you when it then comes to, perhaps finding a role that you really want to apply for, or putting yourself out there, developing a great LinkedIn profile. So that's a, resource that people can use if they want to refer to things that you've done before. It's kind of like a live CV. So I think Gareth's point is really important there with making sure that you keep it up to date, that it adequately represents you, so all of the great things that you've done. And I think it's important not to downplay that. You'll already have so many skills and know so many people. So an exercise that I've always found quite useful is to do a kind of concentric map. So I think Gareth had a similar graphic with reference to LinkedIn of you're in the center and then your friends of friends, your friends of friends of friends. And you can do quite a similar exercise with regard to people that you know. So it could be, people who are on your course, friends of yours, lecturers, careers advisors, anyone that you've interacted with, and then go wider than that. So if you've done some volunteering, if you've had a weekend job, if you're working whilst at university, all of those are people that you know. And that's where I think something like networking, when people kind of say the word, I think it can sound very scary. It can sound like it's something really formal. You have to do it in a certain way. There's this pressure, you're going to be judged. But really, I think the best way to see it is it's just chatting to people. So like you would, chat to people kind of day to day. It's just doing that, but in a slightly different context. So it might be that you go, as Louise mentioned, you search on Eventbrite. For me, I might have put something in like international development. You'll then find lots of events going on. It's really worth going to them. You never know what you're going to learn, who you're going to meet. And I think importantly, you can meet people, not necessarily just with the intention of it then leading to a job. I think you can also meet people, they might become really good career mentors for you. Someone who has a lot more experience who can help to guide you through the process. It might be that it's someone who, you can learn a lot from them about the sector. It may well be that in years to come, a role could potentially come out of it, or they might, through a friend of a friend or someone that they know, they could put you forward for something. But I think it's just keeping it a lot more simple than that. So when you go to these things or meet different people, I think it's also thinking, okay, let's have these conversations and then what can I learn from them? So the same, any role that you go into, I think throughout your career, you can always learn things from people that you're working with. They all would have had their career paths to get there. So it's worth sitting down and asking them, and that's exactly what I did when I spent the time at the Red Cross between my degree and master's, a huge part of that was obviously the job experience, but it was also chatting with everybody that I could who worked there. So people working in international, you know, how did they get there? What deployments have they been on? For people in the UK, similarly, how did they get to the positions that they're in? What did, you know, did they go through a very academic path? Did they go through, you know, a very fieldwork heavy path, for instance? And I think what's amazing with that is there's often no one route. And I think, again, that's a really positive thing, because it means that there's then so much opportunity. And it's not just, you know, studying a particular area, which means that you have to go into a certain role. I think increasingly it's recognised that you will have, you know, lots and lots of detailed knowledge of the subject area for which you've studied, but it's all of the skills that you've gained from doing a degree. So, you know, the writing ability, the communication skills to things like presenting, the managing to prioritize things, time management, you know, having multiple deadlines at the same time. These are all skills that then can then be applied to the workplace. So I think when going back to that mapping, you can map everybody that you know, but also have a think about all of those skills that you have, you know, particular subject areas that you're interested in, but skills that you have as well. And then I did write a few kind of notes down, so I'll just have a quick look at kind of what I've already said. So yeah, so I think with networking, yeah, that's the key is don't see it as a scary thing, see it as, you know, a chance to chat with people, find out their experience. You never know what's going to then crop up. With proactive job searching, I think, again, similarly, that can sound very scary, you know, making contact with someone who you possibly haven't met in person before, thinking, you know, they've got this really important role. Are they going to want to hear from me? All of those things. But as Louise and Gareth have said, they would have once been in that position. And I think often people are quite delighted to hear from people who'd like to speak to them, because it's the ultimate accolade that that's someone who, you know, has a lot of respect for the work that they're doing or is interested in that. And I think, you know, people see that as a really positive thing. I think sometimes people have a lot on, so it might, you know, I think it's important then not to get disheartened. And in that sense, it's thinking, absolutely go for it, you know, go for it with these proactive, you know, and speculative approaches. Really think about what it is that you want to say. So as Gareth and Louise have both said, is there a very specific thing that you'd like to ask? Is it that you want to shadow someone? Is it that you'd like to, you know, see if there's any internship opportunities? Or is it that you would just like to have a chat with them, you know, meet for a cup of tea or a coffee and just have a chat about, you know, how they got there, what their organisation does, etc. And so if you're quite clear in your ask, I think that really helps to then, you know, develop that conversation further, because you're very clear about what it is that you're kind of asking them for. And I think it's just remembering that there is nothing to lose. You know, the worst case scenario is that they aren't able to meet or you don't get a reply from them, but that's, you know, that's the absolute worst case scenario, which is not a bad one. You know, you've gone for it, you've kind of made the effort, and I think, you know, most people would then reply, even if it's a, you know, kind of slightly belated one. So I think it's remembering, if you don't get a response from someone, not to take that personally. You know, it might just be that they, at that particular time, they're not checking their LinkedIn as frequently, or they've got a lot on, but don't let that stop you from, you know, perhaps sending a follow-up or you know, continuing to contact others. And I think it's remembering that how many skills that you have. So yes, you know, you may be contacting a person who's in a role that you really want, or you think they're doing really amazing work, but just remember how much you then also have to offer. So, you know, you're studying at such a fantastic university where you will have gained so many skills that you can then apply to any role that you do. And University of Manchester graduates are very sought after. I think time and time again, when they do the kind of university rankings, you know, we're seen as very, very employable. And so I think it's remembering that in your application, that, you know, or speculative approaches, is that, you know, it would be fantastic for you to then be able to offer these skills or sit down and chat about, you know, why you're so passionate about that area of work. So just remember all that you have to offer as well. And I think that's really important. And just by way of example, it was a number of years ago now, I think, when I was looking at wanting to do internships, after my degree. And I actually found that it was the LinkedIn and I think the email address of the head of the UK part of the World Food Programme. And I think because of my master's and, my interest in things like food security, I was like, that would be an amazing place to work, So found all his details, wrote a kind of speculative, like, hello, like, this is me, I'm doing all of this stuff. It would be great to, find out if there's any volunteering opportunities or if you've got any internships coming up. So I got in touch with him and I did receive a reply, and he said, oh, thank you so much. It's great to hear from people who are interested in this. Unfortunately, we don't have anything coming up at this time, but we'll keep this, on record. And that's the other thing. You might well contact someone. They may not have something at that exact time, but the fact that you've shown how proactive you are, you've made it very clear that you're interested in that area, something might come up, a few months later or the following year. You just never know. And so I think there's just nothing lost in making those approaches. And I think it just says a lot about you as a person, rather than just applying to things, when you see them formally advertised. As Louise has made clear, there are many other ways in which you can find jobs. And so it's doing all that you can to be, kind of proactive in that. And the same as I mentioned with the Red Cross, with Pump Aid, that was because of relationships that I'd already established with them. So if you do something like an internship or even any job that you do, is making sure you do it, to the best of your ability, because you just never know where that could then lead to. For me, it then led to much bigger roles because I already had that relationship with them. So, and arguably that again was networking. You spend your time at the internship working hard, chatting with others. So that's all forms of networking. So again, trying to make it less scary or seeming like a really formal thing, because it just doesn't have to be. So yeah, I think those are lots of the main things. And then for the charity sector in particular, some of the websites that it also can be quite useful to kind of look at, maybe just see what's out there. Also, some organizations do advertise on there, but as Louise mentioned, through organizations' own social media, going onto their specific websites is also very useful, because there is a cost to advertising on particularly these big websites. It's very costly. So for small charities in particular, it's not always feasible to then do that. Because for them it's then just like such a cost to then recruitment, the kind of added cost. But the kind of big ones would be things like Charity Job. Bond is another really good one, so that's lots of development organizations. But as Louise said, just remembering, particularly if you've got certain organizations or areas that you're particularly passionate about, is then doing specific searches for those. So I know, doing a kind of plug for the Royal Geographical Society, we currently do have a few roles, and I know that they've been advertising them on social media and also on our website. So it's particularly useful, to use those platforms. And that's how I found out about my role, earlier in the year, as I was looking specifically on the website. So that's quite useful, kind of doing it in that targeted way. And then I think the other thing, which Louise also previously mentioned, is how to kind of make yourself stand out. So when you're doing these speculative approaches, is almost not selling yourself, but making it quite clear that then you're a person that they should meet with or they should consider for a position or something else. So and it can be as simple as, if you've got a particular area of interest, you could see if there's journals or magazine publications that you could be reading. So for instance, with geography, the RGS has a magazine called Geographical Magazine, and there's lots of things available digitally. So or you could become a member of certain organizations, some of which are very low cost, or there's kind of student options. But it's how to then make yourself stand out and show that actually, yes, you're studying this, but you have that much of a passion that you've got all these other areas as well that you can say, well, I volunteer here, or I read this, depending on also obviously the amount of time that you have to kind of give to this, because it's a big thing kind of studying a degree. And so if it's just something like you read a magazine, you can say something like that and it can help you to stand out, but it doesn't have to be a hugely time consuming thing that you're doing. So I think it's just keeping all of that in mind. So I hope that that's been useful. I've got like notes kind of written all over the place, so I think I've said most of it. But if you've got any questions or you want to, contact me on LinkedIn or anything, then please feel free to. And I hope that that's been a useful, just a few examples that just hopefully show everything that Louise and Gareth have already mentioned.
Cara, thank you so much. That's invaluable advice and information. I'm really, really grateful to you. So we're going to be staying on the call for up to 15 minutes longer. So you're very welcome to put any questions to Cara, Gareth, and me in the chat, or unmute, put your camera on, ask us in person. So before you do that, I'm just going to switch the recording off. So just bear with me and just